doesn't offend me, but it's kind of stupid that some people that try to impress me sometime will swear a lot talking to me. And I don't really like that. I mean, I don't like the fact that I do it. I'm not really ashamed of it, but I'm not proud of it. I mean, it kind of is what it is. My father said it was a sign of a limited vocabulary. Jesus Christ. Oh.
He was born in the heart of the Great Depression, in the security of his grandmother's Midwestern home. His name, however, would be made 2,170 miles away in San Francisco. 64 years after his legendary brother Philip enters politics, John Lowell Burton, the younger brother, is remembered for his own political contributions. John Burton was a force both admired and reviled in the California State Assembly, a member of the United States Congress, the leader of the California Senate, and director of the California Democratic Party.
I remember the house we lived in, 3001 North 48th in Chambers. A block away was like the Burleigh Street, the shopping center, where you could buy stuff, Burleigh movie and all that. The playground where my older brothers played ball. I was kind of young. Friends of his and my mother claimed, quote, I was being the baby, like us kids will buy this, but oh, that Johnny, like I was a cute little kid, maybe the favorite, I don't know. My mother worked for the Archdiocese. I think she made phone calls trying to raise money or whatever. She was Irish Catholic, could cry at a Lassie movie, could cry when I'd take my daughter over to see her and we were leaving the house. Where are you going? But she was tough. She supported my father through med school. She always worked the job because until he became a doctor, we were fine. Nobody had money then, but we were fine. And she wanted to get a mink coat. People had mink coats. And my old man thought it was kind of frivolous. So my mother was a legal secretary at the time, got a second job at night, got herself a mink coat, quit the second job. Then later she wanted a car. And again, my old man thought, you know, Mildred, you don't need a car. So she got a second job, bought herself a Buick, 48 Buick convertible or something like that, off of her boss. And then she worked for this guy who was a lawyer. She went in and asked for a raise. He didn't give her a raise. She quit. He had to hire 2 women to take her place, which gave her great satisfaction. My father went to medical school in Chicago. He had been a traveling salesman when he was young. He had been a pool hustler when he was young. He did a whole lot of stuff. And at the age of 36, he decided he wanted to be a doctor and went to med school at Chicago, came home on the weekends. One of my great regrets in life, I never really asked questions. We didn't ask questions about stuff. But I shot pool with him a couple times. In the way he held the cue, I knew he could shoot some pool. He was very liberal in his viewpoint. He walked a picket line against the Hearst paper, I guess it was the Chicago Sun, when he was in med school. And he remembers the company trucks backing up into the pickets and shooting, you know, the exhaust at him. He was one of the few white doctors that would take patients in the Fillmore then, which was the black neighborhood in town. He talked about stuff at the dinner table. They would discuss issues, to discuss Roosevelt, big fan, to discuss people like Harold Ickes, jumping ahead again, Henry Wallace. But he always cared for the underdog, and I believe that's where me and Bobby Phillip got whatever we got. We were Depression babies, but we never were in want. Never went without a meal. Never went without clothes, although I'd have to run away from school sometime because there were 3 other brothers. They're mad at Philip, so they'd get get Burton's kid brother, not have to run my ass home because they'd be chasing me.
His older brother a teenager, and little Johnny just 8 years old. The family decides they want to leave the Midwest and take a fateful trip through California.
We took a trip, summer of 40, went through the northern route, Fargo, up, down the coast, and stopped at various places, Washington, Oregon, California. He looked at San Francisco, looked at Santa Barbara, I think one other place, and I guess it was a coin flip, and he took San Francisco. If you're an old city guy, and I go over this with my friend John Madden, they ask, where'd you go to school? You didn't go to Harvard, you went to Lincoln, which was a high school. You define yourself by the high school, and if you're a Catholic, you define yourself by the parish. In Milwaukee, we wore knickers, and during the summer, we walked barefoot because it was hot. We moved to San Francisco. We lived on 17th Avenue, walking down 16th Avenue, barefoot. Philip's got long, Bobby and me are wearing knickers, so we then came the Knickerbocker brothers. You went to the playground, you screwed around. I was really young then, but Philip and Bobby, played baseball in the park, played softball, played touch football, etc. And I was like, just kind of screwing around. And as a freshman, I was second string 10. I got drunk before one of the first game, I think, sat on the bench, did make a bucket, and then ran down the thing, shaking everybody's hand. Went to State College. As a freshman, I made the varsity, but, got in at dog meat time. As a sophomore, I played a little bit more, got to start a couple games. And then as a junior, I played, and then as a senior, played and was big deal, second string all conference. I had a good set because I used to look and shoot it. In fact, at Davis, we played Davis. I got 25, and the guy who was the old gym manager, whatever, he claimed there was the greatest shooting exhibition he had seen at the gym.
On June 11th, 1954, on the day he is scheduled to cross the stage for his college graduation, John Burton beats the draft and enters the United States Army. Old enough to understand the terrible consequences of World War II and Korea, Burton lives for the next 2 years at the center of the Cold War, in a country controlled by the French, the British, the Russians, and the Americans. Smart enough to stay out of trouble, Burton spends much of his time playing basketball and refereeing games between the countries.
I come out of the Army and asked my mother, what's up? Philip's running for office again. This is 56. I said, shit, he lost to a dead man. Who's he running against? I got out the Army, I think it was right before the primary, and I started ringing doorbells and started doing stuff, and then worked hard in his election to election day. Then he won. Then I got kind of active in the Young Democrats. And then when I talked to Moscone, when he started getting active, I said, shit, George, it's like a hunch game. It's us against them. Shit's basketball, man. It's fun. I believe that the two greatest politicians of my time were Lyndon Baines Johnson and Philip Burton. Philip could accomplish more with less than anybody. Philip always had a political bug, which I did not have. I was going to be a history teacher and a basketball coach. Being his little brother never bothered me. I mean, politically. Being Philip's brother, Philip could be a pain in the ass. We were brothers, but we were like 6 years between brothers, 4 years, 6 years. We all did our own thing. I had my own friends. They had their friends. They did their own stuff. I mean, we didn't get drunk together. I don't think we went to movies together. We went to movies as a family. We were family. He was the first young liberal to challenge the old guard. He worked hard. Philip led the way. He worked hard to elect one of his colleagues, John O'Connell, who became a state assemblyman and then later stupidly ran for Congress. He was the force behind George's election for supervisor and state senate. It'd be fair to say he was a big force behind George becoming mayor. Willie Brown picked up a district, and then I came in, and you have a state senator, you have 2 members of the assembly, and we were a block. And my brother told Willie and I, when we got elected, he said, if the 2 of you stick together, it takes 3 votes to beat you, because you already got 2. And if somebody finds 2, you got a tie. It takes 3 to beat you. And we didn't forget that. We got elected on an anti-Jess Unruh thing because he opposed us, and the liberals in the party didn't like Jess. So we both voted against him. And Willie voted the first one against him, alphabetical. Brown, no. Brown, they called his name twice. And then I go no, and I'm sitting next to Unruh on the floor. Tip O'Neill told me, and Tip and Philip had problems. Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the House, because Tip, he could see Philip was ambitious, but again, he was ambitious to do good. And he could support people that could do as good as him if he could find somebody as good as him that knew how to do shit. But Philip was the political driving force and the political genius behind putting together the coalition. People used to call it a machine. Shit, you have a machine, you have to. Dick Daley had a machine. We couldn't give a guy a job at a butcher shop. But we had a coalition of people, minorities, labor unions, lefties, peaceniks, civil rights activists. I remember my brother telling me years ago, before I was even in, that biggest groups in the city politically, the minorities, because they tend to vote as a group, labor unions, because they tend to vote as a group then, and public employees who at that time had to live in the cities. You know, he was always thinking. But he lived and breathed politics. And he was smart. He was driven. He was pain in the ass. But he was always doing it for the right reason. He wanted power and influence, not so he could get rich. I mean, his tax returns were an embarrassment. You know, he had the short farm. He wouldn't invest in anything. He had to be convinced to buy a house because he didn't want to own something.
In 1983, Philip Burton dies suddenly in a San Francisco hotel room at the age of 56. His congressional seat would be inherited by his wife, Sala, and then her hand-picked successor, Nancy Pelosi. For the next 35 years, the Burton seat would belong to 2 powerful women. Pelosi would go on to become Speaker of the House.
Sala Burton was probably, I don't know if she was lefter than Philip Burton, but she was tougher. She was tougher. We go back to see Sala, she's dying, and Nancy Pelosi. She's dying. And it was made clear to me by the county chair, Agar Jakes, that Sala was going to, for you, she said, Sala's going to support Nancy for her seat. We went back to that hospital. She's dying. And she was a big woman. And she was like shrunk in pain. She called us back and she starts talking about how she would like us to support Nancy Pelosi. And she starts talking about Nancy Pelosi. You would have thought she saw into the future Speaker Nancy Pelosi and what she's done in Congress and how she's became Speaker, what she did, how she holds the minority caucus together. But that's, says now, she's very operational. She knows how to do her family's in politics. She grew up in this. She knows how to do this. She knows how to do that. She's good on this. She's good on that. And I'm walking out like, holy shit. I walk back home. Sala's still alive. I call a press conference. I said, I came back from Washington, saw Sala. She's doing pretty good. She's not going to run for re-election. And she endorsed Nancy Pelosi for her seat in November. My brother died in 1983. I was in the city. I think some friend of mine who worked for me called me. I went down to the hotel, and there's a picture somewhere, and I think there's Diane, Willie, and me, just kind of a dark picture. I think his last words were, "oh shit," as he fell over. I think had he gone to doctors more, he might have lived longer. He didn't like going to doctors.
Philip and John would find their place in the sun and gain respect and notoriety in public service. Their middle brother, Bobby, was not so lucky.
But Bobby was a sweet man, and everybody said he was the nice Burton. I think he was smarter than me. I always had a problem being the little brother that was jumped over him to get the spot. Philip could have done it with either of us. And I think his concern with Bobby was that he was a pretty good alcoholic, or bad. And also, he was very soft. He was like our mother. He wanted to be liked or something. Or Philip once said, I says, well, why am I here instead of Bobby? He says, because, you've been around. Says, Bobby will let him pick his pockets. Somebody will talk him into giving up half his district for reapportionment. And he was on the community college board, and Jerry put him on the prison board. And he taught at San Quentin. So when Jerry was kind of worried about bleeding heart on the prison boards, and Bobby said, I've heard every bullshit story from every con in the joint. Nobody's going to bullshit me to get out.
He drove a purple sports car and wore mod suits, while most of his colleagues were stuck in blue or a boring beige. George Moscone, social, fun to be around, masterful at public policy. He would write epic legislation, such as the school lunch program for kids and civil rights protections. From the playground to the center of power, John Burton and George Moscone would remain best friends.
Yeah, I met George, and he was a senior. I was a freshman. I cut school at Lincoln, and his buddies, they had just been out celebrating winning the city championship at SI. He and this guy, Cappy Lavin. And I knew Cappy from the playgrounds, but I didn't know George, and then I met George there. I was a tag-along guy to older guys. Yeah, George and I got him into politics. We were playground directors together, not show up at his playground. He was at J.P. Murphy. He was upset about something, about a legal decision, and he wanted to know how somebody became a judge. And I said, shit, how the hell do I know? Go ask Philip. So we met Philip at a Compton's cafeteria. We go down to Compton's, Van Ness Mark, and I don't know, Philip starts asking George all these questions. And from my knowledge, George never had a political thought. I never had much of a political thought. Philip starts asking George about the death penalty. George says he thinks it's, man's inhumanity to man. It makes no sense. Asks him about loyalty oaths. George says, it's abhorrent to the Bill of Rights. He said, I'm there like, what's all this crap? And so we had an election coming up, and other people would know this guy, Milton Marks. Milty. And so Philip talked George into running for that seat. And he said, you're not going to win, but you'll get a seat on the county committee. You'll get appointments to the Democratic Central Committee. You'll get your name out there and stuff will happen. So George ran, and he ran a very good campaign, got his name, a very attractive candidate, George, good-looking guy, good-looking family at that time. He could have been a great Supreme Court justice. George had a great legal mind because he had a great legal mentor, a guy named Charlie Morgan. But George was, George was a piece of work. It would have been interesting. He took a shot at governor, probably wasn't in it. Very smart, good sense of humor, quite phonogenic. You'd send them up, people would be saving them in the campaign. Good campaigner.
The convivial and oftentimes extraordinary George Moscone filled his short public life with purpose, serving as a supervisor, leader of the California State Senate, and a populist mayor in the city in which he lived his life. George wrote legislation with lasting influence, and he is best remembered as a person with remarkable promise who cared deeply and personally about the disenfranchised and the middle class. John Burton's friendship with George Moscone ended on a brutal morning when politics and decency were shattered and George Moscone was shot to death at the age of 49.
I was on the floor of the house, and someone called, and I was in the, quote, speaker chambers, and I'm on the floor, and Philip walks in, and I think Philip had been in Europe or some shit, and I just grabbed him and said, he's dead. Well, let's see. I know George for 30-something years, and I know other people long. We were very, very close friends. I mean, I was personally, I'm closer to George than I was with my own brothers. We were close, and I missed him. But it was shitty. But you can't do nothing about what you can't do nothing about. You learn that in drug rehab.
A newspaper article in the 1960s called them, without sarcasm, the Hepcats. The friendship of Burton and Willie Brown has always been extraordinary, both for its closeness and its complexity. the best of friends, walking in the same hallways, they have made efforts to distance themselves from each other.
And there was this young articulate, black attorney, Willie Brown, who I happen to have gone to college with. He was a sharp guy, and some Pacific Heights Republicans and other people supported him. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson kept escalating the bombings. I'm sitting in the office of a guy named Bill Stanton, and I'm getting very upset with the increased bombing. So I send a copy of that to Harold Wilson, Prime Minister of England, Charles de Gaulle. I'm not sure I included the Pope. And I sent one to a guy I didn't know, but I knew, named Connie Ziliakis, who was a left-wing member of Parliament. And I just, Willie Brown, John Burton, Bill Stanton. Some real conservative newspaper reporter winds up Huey Burns, the pro tem of the Senate, and Jack McCarthy, who's the vice president of Senate Rules, that they're going to do an investigation, see if it's a violation of the Logan Act from 1792, because we used to just co-author each, just do stuff. And I went up to him and said, I didn't think this was going to cause a lot of shit. And I don't want you to get in the shit. I got a better district than you. And they want to recall us and that. And he was kind of like, well, we all do the same thing, or just, and I said, well, I got to say something. And my recollection was, I don't want you to say something and it makes me look like I'm not. I made him a fucking peace hero overnight. But, and we had a caucus about it, and some people were upset, what is it? And some old assemblyman, a couple guys got up and says, yeah, what is this war about anyway? Now that you mention it. And it became much ado about nothing, but I was very nervous for a while. Not with me, they couldn't have recalled me with a gun, but a black guy in that district, who knows, but it just all fizzled, and as I say, we all became great heroes in the peace movement. We're still close. We argue, we fight. We're like an old married couple. Our kids grew up together, we're fine. We just, do we get along? Well, we see each other, often enough, but we just did our own shit. He did, we both were married at the time. Willie still is. Actually, so am I. But, we get in these screaming matches in caucus, and some of these guys that didn't like me, boy, that did it now. Willie's going to be through with that asshole. And then we're walking out of the caucus laughing about something. We'd probably both take a bullet for each other, but hope it ain't fatal. No, but I love them. Actually, 68 was really exciting, and I was nothing. I was a McCarthy delegate, and so I was in all the McCarthy stuff, and loved Gene McCarthy. Gene McCarthy, all right, 1968, Gene McCarthy's running for president. And the first thing I'm going to do if I'm elected president is to take down the fence around the Capitol and have a picnic on the lawn. That was one of his things. Fast forward 1972. I'm giving a speech in West LA for McGovern. The first thing George McGovern's going to do when he's president is tear down the fence around the White House and have a picnic on the lawn. Fast forward to 74, member of Congress, sitting in the Democratic Club. In walks Clean Jean. Senator, how's my man? You know, when you steal my lines, you ought to give me credit. The fuck's that? I go home. What the hell's he talking about? It dawned on me. I see him 2 days later. Senator, you have my deepest apology. Accepted. What's the odds he would be watching it? What's the odds 2 years he'd give a shit? That was Gene. No, I mean, I love him. He did it when nobody had the guts to do it. He did it when a time like me was thinking of running as a favorite son. No, Gene McCarthy gave us hope.
The indefatigable Robert Moretti. He led by example, fiery, athletic, the smartest voice in the room, competitive in everything from basketball to predicting election percentages. His colleagues, ambitious themselves, elect him Speaker of the Assembly at the age of 35. Loved by those with whom he worked, Moretti was also an effective foil for his next-door neighbor and good friend, Republican Governor Ronald Reagan.
Love him, Bobby Moretti. When he was Speaker, I would bet if you ask Willie about Bob Moretti, well, no, he loved Moretti, shit. Well, I love Moretti. I would think to some extent that the most fun Willie Lewis Brown Jr. and John L. Burton never had was the couple years when Bobby Moretti was Speaker. The lunatics took over the asylum. Willie wanted to be floor leader. And I said, you know, right now people think you're a loudmouth black. And if you become the floor leader, you're a loudmouth black floor leader. If you become chair of Ways and Means, which he had never been on, I had been on, and I was a logical chair of Ways and Means, I said, people will see how fucking smart you are. And it changes the whole thing of Willie Brown. You think? Yeah. And then I became rules chair, which was cool because Moretti let me as chair run rules. Willie as Ways and Means, run Ways and Means. He never stuck his nose into our business. And he just was, well, you can see, nobody can see it on my face. It was fun. And I've never I don't know if I talked to Willie, but I think that was really the most fun because he and I were really outcasts. Bob Moretti was part of UNRWA's group, and he and I were outcasts. And when we took over, and then it was Willie, Bobby Moretti, Jack Fenton, who was Willie's, got elected with Willie and I. Well, Willie was clearly closer to Moretti, but Bobby had just let me do my shit. Yeah, we had fun. I'll give you a great piece of trivia. So there's a special election. This guy, Wally Carabian, who is Moretti's floor leader. Leo McCarthy, who really wasn't part of our group, gets Moretti into a guy named Ralph Ochoa. Moretti expects everybody to go with his guy. I meet this guy Ochoa, and he's calling me Mr. Burton. Not my cup of tea. And I go, shit. I walk down the halls from my office in the Rules Committee into the Assembly chamber. I see this guy come by. Got long hair, kind of draped. I walk up to Carabian. I said, hey, that guy that went out there. Says, is that your guy, Alatorre? He goes, yeah, why? He says, I'm with him. first impression's right. Everybody else on the team's for Ralph Ochoa. So there's a come to Jesus meeting in Moretti's office. And there's guys that are kind of jealous of Caribbean. Maybe Jack Fenton wants to be floor leader, who the hell knows what. And they're discussing Caribbean's future. I'm in the meeting. I get on the floor, phone, call Aldo's restaurant. It was a big restaurant here out north somewhere, fancy joint. He's got his staff there. I says, Wally, get your ass in here. They're deciding on what's going. Well, I got my staff here. I says, you ain't gonna have any goddamn staff. You don't get your ass in here. So he doesn't immediately show up. So he finally shows up and he starts getting shit. He's not on the team and he's not doing this. And he says, well, what about Burton? What about him? He's for aleatory. And Bobby goes, Burton? The fuck am I going to do with Burton? Burton always does his thing. We're talking about you. And so he gets taken off. Majority Leader Fenton gets it, and I get Moretti on the rules, or not Moretti, but Caribbean rules. But Bobby goes, Burton, what do you want me to do with him?
In 1974, Bob Moretti runs for governor in a crowded field that includes George Moscone, who will soon drop out, and Secretary of State Jerry Brown. In the early round of endorsements, Willie Brown endorses Bob Moretti. Bob Moretti enjoyed taking John Burton into budget negotiations with the gentlemanly governor, Ronald Reagan, partly because he respected Burton's passion for issues, and also because he enjoyed so much watching Burton drop political fireworks on Reagan's chair. Moretti felt slighted that there were only 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. He found new ends from which to burn the candle, and he did nothing halfway. Unfortunately, that included smoking. He smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day, rarely slept, never stopped moving, and one afternoon collapsed playing tennis. He died on May 12, 1984. Bob Moretti lived a full life in only 47 years. John Burton says those who served under Speaker Moretti never stopped talking about him. The indomitable Burton, raised to be tough in virtually every situation, is humbled by drugs. For several years, drug abuse is a battle that consumes his life. The experience changes him forever.
I went back to Congress to help my brother get the leadership. He lost it by 1 vote, partly because people that should have voted for him didn't, or he would have been a majority leader. And if he would have been majority leader, Tip O'Neill would have been the greatest speaker in history. So when he lost that, it wasn't fun for me anymore. And then, got a little bit deeper into drugs and got so deep that I had to dig myself out by going to a program. He didn't know what my problem was. A couple guys told him I had a problem. He didn't know. He told somebody who told me that one Sunday, and I forget it was, but it was before I decided to quit, that I wanted to talk to him. He said, I think Johnny wants to quit. And I think I ran the next election and quit. You know, what's some square guy going to do? Talk to some guy that's doing drugs. Yeah. Drugs get out of the control because it's the nature of drugs. It's something that I don't think I couldn't mess with it, and I figured I could mess with anything. It ain't good. But it was stupid. And I remember I got out of big discussion with the doctor was I knew had a drug problem, but I didn't think I had a drinking problem. So he asked me to write my drinking history. I don't know, starting at 16, going to the park and having a couple, 2 quarts of beer heat on, then drinking wine and all this. And the guy looked at it, he says, well, you're probably right. You don't have a drinking problem. Says, but I don't know, I look at this, looks like you might. And when I got out of the program, I went back to Washington. I called Congressman Wilbur Mills. So I called him and I said, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to talk to you. I just came back from this. Oh, John, I don't understand anything about drugs. I said, I understand that I could have a drinking problem, and if I think I have a drink or two, that a bell would go off. It's warning bell. Oh, John. John, sometime you're in the shower, John, and the telephone rings, John. Or somebody rings the doorbell, John. John, that ever happen and you don't hear the phone or you don't hear the doorbell? Don't count on hearing that bell, John. Never forgot it. John. I asked him, he goes to meetings. He says, go to meetings every day. I says, boy, that's nice of you. And he says, nice of me. Because he goes and he's like he says, I never want to forget where I was, where I went, and where I am today.
The congressional seat Burton vacated was won by his close friend, Barbara Boxer, a woman as tough in style and substance as the Burtons. Boxer would serve 10 years in the Congress and 24 years as a leading member of the United States Senate.
When I was running for Congress but not announced, this little woman comes up to me, says, you're John Burton. I go, yeah. So I'm Barbara Boxer. I says, yeah, I know you are. You ran against Pete Aragoni, my friend. Says, you're going to run for Congress. I says, I don't know. Yeah, you're going to run for Congress and I'm going to help you. I would say within 45 minutes, she put together the bulk of my Marin County congressional campaign, all who had supported her. Predominantly women, but also some men, and supported her through every campaign, including her, first Senate run. And then they supported the others, but it wasn't necessary. In fact, Barbara and I were talking about that. But she would just put it all together. Shit. Never gave it a thought. Philip was pushing Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi and Barbara Boxer didn't run against each other because that would have been shit. And also, I don't think any way in the world would I probably been able to beat Philip. But I'm for Barbara. He's for Nancy. Oh, fuck.
Political redemption comes in 1996, when John Burton is elected once again to the legislature. John Burton will make a decision to do something his brother could never succeed in doing. John wants to run the House in which he serves.
And then what happens, term limits comes in. As I looked up, there was nobody running I wanted to vote for. So I took a shot and won. Term limits and the pro tem opens up. I'm supporting Pat Johnson. And some of the liberals are coming to me and say, you have to run for pro tem. I said, I'm not running for pro tem. I'm for Pat Johnson. And he said, why? A couple said they couldn't vote for Pat. I said, well, I don't give a shit. I'm for Pat. The court ruled on term limits. So I called Pat and I says, Pat, no, I get a call from Tom Hayden. And he said, the court ruled, what are you going to do? I says, I'm going to do what I told you I'm doing. I'm for Pat Johnson. I called Patrick. I said, Pat, the court ruled term limits is it. You run and I'm for you. You don't run, I'll take a shot. Patrick says, I'm good. I've been thinking about it. I don't think I want to do it. I said, then I'll run. He said, that's fine. I don't think I want to do it. I don't want to do it, in fact. So I'm on the phone. Hayden first, Barbara Lee. I had 6 votes, counting my own, in a half hour. And then I got to get to work. 2 days later, I get a call from Pat. And he said, I've been talking to Margie, his wife, and we discussed it, and I think I want to go. And I says, fuck, man. I says, I'm out there. And he says, no, I don't expect you not to run, but I don't want you to read in the paper like I'm going back on my word to you. I says, hey, it's cool, man. And so I just went out, and I think, my opinion, I could be wrong, I think Billy loves me, but I think he was probably more comfortable with Pat. I have no idea. I mean, I could figure out why, maybe because I'm me and, Pat's Pat. I'd be more comfortable with Pat than I would with me.
Ayes 32, noes 0. Congratulations, Senator, on your election.
In the end, John Burton wanted it more. He deserves it. He'll be a wonderful leader for this House and this party. I congratulate him, and I want to be on your team.
No, but it was just, I could do stuff. I mean, and I'm a left-wing liberal guy. In the fact that I could protect poor people and help them and do stuff. We had a big fight over, it wasn't a fight, it was over a Cal Grant program. I did not know what a Cal Grant program was, as with much of the stuff I've done. I had great staff. But Cal Grant, Gray wanted a bill on Cal Grants, but it would not fully fund the program. It was almost like Congress, where you authorize something but don't appropriate it all. And so it was maybe 30% of the program would get funded. Ortiz said, well, I want to fully fund it. And I asked my education person, I said, what is it? What do we mean? They told me, I said, that's what we're doing. We fully funded it. I got support from the private colleges, from all the colleges, and a guy who worked for Brulty, conservative guy, but a good guy, but got to college on a Cal Grant. I got 119 votes on the Cal Grant. My name ain't on the bill.
Bob Giroux said Burton's greatest strength was making sure that bills passed under his watch were implemented. According to Giroux, Burton had long arms and political influence that ran deep. A case can be made that John Burton is the most important legislator of the modern era. In 1956, the year John Burton first walked a precinct for his brother Phil, Republicans dominated California politics. Both of our senators and our governor, the Vice President of the United States and the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, were all Republicans. Our legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly, were controlled by Republicans. In John Burton's political lifetime, he has seen the other party veer toward irrelevance. While Burton does not take credit, no one person deserves it, he does point to one campaign.
Pete Wilson would have been a great governor if he didn't run for president. he had to move to the right, and I didn't like that because I knew him. I knew him when he got elected to the Assembly, to Claire Bergner's seat. And I didn't like that. And, you know, he took shots at immigrants and some poor. I don't like picking on people that can't fight back. I mean, and I didn't like that. I think Pete's a good guy. When I became pro tem, I heard from Ken Maddy, a great man, former senator, died. Says Pete asked Ken talking. Pete asked me, "What's he going to do? What am I going to do with Burton?" And I says, "Well, what'd you say?" He says, "Burton's going to want you to take care of, quote, his poor people, and after you do that, whatever you want to talk about's fine." And I went in to see Pete, and he goes, "What do you want?" I says, "I want back every dime that we took from AFDC, SSI, all the poor people, that we had to take it when we didn't have any money." I says, "Because of you and your guts for the tax increase, that was really gutsy, then I want it back." He said, "What else?" I said, "I don't care." Where I think Pete made his biggest mistake was at 187.
They keep coming. 2 million illegal immigrants in California. The federal government won't stop them at the border, yet requires us to pay billions to take care of them. Governor Pete Wilson sent the National Guard to help the Border Patrol. But that's not all.
For Californians who work hard, pay taxes, and obey the laws, I'm suing to force the federal government to control the border. And I'm working to deny state services to illegal immigrants. Enough is enough.
Governor Pete Wilson.
John Burton will go down as the guy who gave life and structure and success to the California Democratic Party. And even I couldn't do that. And I didn't do that. Well, I got to be governor, but I couldn't do what he did as party chairman. So that's pretty neat.
Jerry has been a hell of a governor. I mean, I've known Jerry. I know Jerry when he was his sister's little brother. So I mean, sometime when he first became governor back in the thing, that, you know, I'm not thinking of him as a governor. I'm thinking of Cynthia's kid brother. No, I think he's been good. He was a pleasure to work with when I was party chair. More moderate than me, but who the hell isn't? But he's done wonders for the state, and I think he's, you know, if you think it's tough following a big brother, how'd you like to follow your goddamn father as being governor? Love Pat Brown. Pat was just, by golly, young man. He was a wonderful human being. Just, you know, good guy, did great things for the state. You know, the Carol Chessman capital punishment thing just kind of screwed everything. Then, of course, the Fair Housing Act cost a lot of seats in the Valley.
Now in his mid-80s, Burton has found some peace in what has oftentimes been a fractured personal life. Married 3 times, Burton first married the activist Michelle Hall in the 1960s. They remarried again several years ago. The pride of both of their lives is their daughter Kimiko and 2 grandchildren.
We got divorced. We're always friends. Makes life easier. It's easier. You don't fight about stuff. No, it's easier. It's just good. Kimiko, yeah, I named her that. Well, her mother was still going through labor. Thought a Japanese name would be cool. She's a lawyer and the public city attorney. She's, as we are wont to say, she's got the best and worst of me and her mother. I mean, she's got her mother's intellect. She's got my brains. She's kind of got both of our tempers. And she's, no, she was a kid. We could play gin rummy together and casino and a whole lot of shit. She's got 2 kids. I'm optimistic because I'm kind of half-ass optimistic anyway. My passion always been poor people. But my old man one day when I'm a kid walking down the street in front of the Emporium department store, and there was always a couple guys there, blind. One guy selling pencils and one guy playing accordion. And my old man would nickel, dime, whatever, cups. And he gave me something, and maybe it was pennies even then, it was way. I said, what's that? And he put a finger in my face, says, you never pass a blind guy without leaving something in the cup. And it's like I can't pass a homeless guy without giving him something. What's the difference?
But they're DAs, and who wants to go against a DA? Especially for a bunch of fatherless kids and some mother that needs the money. I do. I will, and we're going to get this bill through.
I want to be remembered as not being the asshole people think I am, where I would rather be remembered as being a friend of the poor.